Welcome to this Connecting Africa interview. I'm joined by Sudeepto, who's the Vice President of Engineering at Qualcomm Technology, and Elizabeth Migwalla, who is the Vice President of Government Affairs at Qualcomm. And today we're talking a bit about support for startups in Africa and mentorship. So welcome both of you. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So I interviewed you both last year about the Make in Africa Startup Mentorship Program, and back then it was kind of in its infancy. So it'll be great to hear from you guys, what's happened, how it's progressed. But maybe before we start, Sudeepto, maybe just give us a bit of background on the project. What is it all about, and what are the plans to boost innovation in Africa?
Exactly. So let me tell a very small anecdote. Back in October, I had the privilege of visiting Africa for the very first time, and this was at the Mobile World Congress in Kigali, in Rwanda. And Elizabeth and Sarah are also there, and they introduced us to many entrepreneurs in Africa. And this gave us the confidence that we could tap into the startup endeavors in across the continent and see if we can bring the goodness of many of the technologies, including 5G, AI, IoT, and robotics, to the African continent. And that's what gave birth to the Qualcomm Make in Africa program.
All right, wonderful. And then kind of where are we now? How has it progressed? I think you've chosen some startups already.
Yes, we have. We we made an announcement of the program in December, and thanks Paula for covering that. That gave us access to a broader range of startups, and we had over 500 applicants during the months of January, February, and March, and then around mid March we shortlisted, narrowed it down to a set of about 15 candidates. In fact, the 500 candidates applied from 34 countries across Africa, and the 15 hailed from about nine countries. And then we had each one of these startups do roughly like a 20-minute pitch session in front of a broad Qualcomm global jury representing business, technical, IP, and startup backgrounds, and then we pick the final 10, and a bit later I'll tell you all about them.
Okay, wonderful. I want to bring Elizabeth in here, but just tell me a bit about, why it's so important to have a program like this, and why Qualcomm wanted to launch it specifically in Africa.
Yes, so like I said previously, Qualcomm has been in Africa for more than 16 years, okay, as a presence based in Johannesburg. And over those 16 years, we have engaged with government stakeholders basically to discuss and to develop enabling environment for technologies. Okay, so we have been a partner creating the environment for what we see today, starting with 3G, 4G, and now moving on to 5G. However, it came to a point where we realized that it's well and good to have good adopters of technology on the continent, but given where things are going, with 5G being such a platform that enables innovation, first of all, and given the peculiarity of Africa, where we have what I like to call the youth dividend, we have a lot, over 60% of the African population is young, and they are educated, they are citizens of today. That youth dividend fits in very well with the capabilities that 5G can enable. All right, so we thought that if we could convert that into innovators and inventors, because remember, they're the future consumers, that interface would create the kind of effect we've seen in other countries where Sudeepto's team has gone through these innovation programs and have seen results. So it's a bet we took, and I'm glad to say I'm glad we did it, because just by having over 500 applicants and good ones, I mean, some of the solutions very Africa-centric, solving African problems, kind of gives me the feeling that it was a good bet that we made. So that's the background.
Okay, great. Well, it's so nice to hear all the interesting stuff that's coming out of it. You kind of mentioned how many startups applied and all of that. So, Sudeepto, I know we've got startups from Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and Rwanda that were chosen from hundreds of applicants. But I'm interested, which countries did you have the most applications for? And I'm kind of half guessing Nigeria because I saw a lot of Nigerians on the list. And then what kind of sectors stood out as well?
Yeah, so I would say um, we were expecting lots of applicants from Nigeria and Kenya. We also had a lot of applicants from Tunisia. That was a bit of a surprise. And what was a surprise is that we didn't have um many applicants from either South Africa, Egypt, or Algeria. I was thinking that actually and Morocco. I was thinking that from these four countries we'll see, because there's a lot of startup activity in these countries, right? So maybe in next year's round, with your help, we can tap into the startup scene there. But among other areas, we had startups from Uganda. In fact, we have two of them from Uganda, and then we have one startup from Rwanda, and then one from Ghana also. So that's just how the final 10 turned out to be. But most of that, to answer your question, most were from Nigeria and Kenya.
Okay, and then in terms of the industries, are there any particular ones that stood out with a lot of applicants? Are we looking at things like, agri-tech and health tech that are becoming big, or clean energy? What are kind of the things you are seeing as the most interesting ones, maybe that are going to come out of this, or maybe the sectors that had the most applicants, and then you had to whittle it down and only choose a few?
Yeah, I would say not just the top 10, but looking across the 500, um, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see the focus on EV, electric vehicle based businesses, and there are a variety, right? In other countries, you typically see startups focusing on making the EV. In Africa, it's the business around the EV. So there are examples of folks coming up with a ride share and a sort of like a odd job matching system based around EVs. There is another startup who has made which has made a lot of modifications to an EV to extend the range of the vehicle, for instance. So that's one area. Another area we've seen is agri-tech, from let's say rapid composting to using sensor-based diagnostics for determining soil moisture so that scarce water resources can be controlled for irrigation based on live readings. A third area, which is very gratifying, is clean tech, where we have actually a couple of startups who made it to the top 10, who are using recycled, the lead acid batteries for coming up with a variety of applications such as storage banks, right? Because what happens, as you know, batteries typically deplete in their charge hold capacity, but they're still good. It's just that they're not good enough for a car. So now, if you create a battery bank out of those, then you can do wonderful things like power a cell phone tower in the night if you charge them during using solar. And then lastly, healthcare. That has been a big area of startup focus also. And that we almost expected, because, like in other countries, like in India, a third of my startups are in healthcare. In Taiwan, about 20% are in healthcare. So that's a very fertile field for applying these latest technologies. So I almost expected healthcare, but was very happy to see clean tech, agri-tech, and EV-based transportation.
In Africa, you would expect a lot more like fintech related ones, but that not really the sector you were looking for? It seems like a lot of them are coming from other kind of sectors.
Yeah, it's a nature of our program. It's about making in Africa, like Elizabeth said, uh, you know, going from consumers of technology to implementers. In fact, I'll go another step and I'll say designers of using technology, right? So design to implementation to consumption, right? And so typically fintech tends to be, sorry, I have a jet going over. Fintech tends to be focused on cloud-based platforms and software apps and encryption and security. Whereas the nature of our program is encouraging people to use IoT devices in a broader context, right? So you could have AI running on the IoT device. You could have part of the inference running on the IoT device and part of the learning running on the cloud, right? So we're looking for end-to-end applications which have a edge and an IoT component. So I think it's just the nature of our program that attracted these sort of startups versus fintech.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to be focusing on those kind of startups too, because I don't think they always get kind of the funding that they need, right? Elizabeth, I was interested kind of the split for the program when it comes to male-led founders and female-led founders. Was kind of the gender inclusion sector of it, an important metric for the project?
It was an important metric, but I don't think we struggled to find. I mean, we found we didn't go out of our way to, specifically look. We looked for good startups, and they happened to have the gender angle included. Okay, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, one of them is female led. There's one that has 50% female participation. So I think that was gratifying to me. The other thing that I found was that youth, the youth, the youth issue came through. I mean, these were really imaginative presenters when they presented to us with a lot of passion. I mean, even in difficult circumstances, we had some that were, presenting, the connectivity was not good, but, this spirit of, just tenacity. And I don't know Sudeepto, but I think that could have been different. I mean, from the experience you've had. Okay, so honestly, apart from the fact that I was surprised at some of the solutions they had, because I haven't had any experience like Sudeepto had. And for me to see startups involved in health and actually using AI, I thought that was pleasantly surprising to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, what kind of are your expectations for the impact of the program, and the kind of innovations we're going to see?
So my expectations, um, from where I'm sitting, if we can successfully channel them through this mentorship, and if we can get the startups successfully communicating to the stakeholders that would take them to the next level. You see what I mean? For instance, if we can get them in front of, say, operators or other stakeholders, and they can convince them that what they are doing is worth supporting, not just through monetary terms, but through opportunities, okay, and have their products and services extended beyond what they're doing, I think that would be one of my expectations. The other expectation for me is this is just the first cohort, okay? Could this be a program that goes beyond this first cohort, but also where you spread the news and our innovators begin to believe that we can create new innovations that are complete systems, and we can actually fabricate, okay, the technology that we need to solve our problems.
Yeah. It'll be great to see what happens next, and we'll get to that in a second. But I also just wanted to ask you a bit about 5G, because I know when we originally spoke about it, you were talking a lot about 5G innovation and that it needs to be built on the continent. So were there any of the startups that came through that are sort of specific to 5G, or do you think that's something that's going to evolve as we go?
Not specific to 5G, but I think, as Sudeepto may add, the foundation, the process. I mean, 5G, the connectivity and the other sort of capability is an add-on, but the basics, I think, remain the same. That's the first thing. Secondly, we do not yet have, widespread 5G on the continent. That will happen. The timing is right, but we couldn't wait. We needed to start off, and perhaps, this is something that we experience when the 5G networks come in. But, I could ask Sudeepto to add on how we move from, 4G based solutions and enhance them with 5G capability.
Yeah. So, Deepta, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, Elizabeth is right. All the 10 startups we picked will their products and services will run very adequately over 4G. In fact, some of them are looking for precise positioning. Like for instance, we have a startup in operating in Kenya and Uganda with e-bike rentals, and for them knowing where their vehicle is actually very important, right? So it's not only connectivity but also the GNSS based positioning that is critical. So our hope is that through this program we will not only take maximum juice out of 4G, but we will also whet the appetite for when it's time to adopt 5G. They will be ready and they will be knowledgeable about how to use 5G in their future wears, right?
Yeah. And Elizabeth, obviously this kind of program, the recognition and just being involved is really important to the startups. But how important is the mentorship aspect, to them being able to build their companies up going forward?
I mean, that's a perfect question. In fact, to be quite accurate, we are calling this a mentorship program. Why is that important? Because I believe and truly the kind of technical and business and IP related mentorship that these startups will receive from my colleagues in Qualcomm, I want to say is almost second to none in the industry that we're in. So what Sudeepto has done, what the team has done, is to identify, from our perspective, almost the very best and the most appropriate. Okay, professionals who have built systems in real life. Okay, Qualcomm real life, who will be able to impart on the startups the real tools of the trade. Okay, so this is something that you cannot get in school, in college, in no other experience. And I think this is probably one of the most unique aspects of this program, at least from my perspective. Remember, I'm sitting here on the continent and I'm experiencing the environment, and I'm also looking at the capabilities that are available in Qualcomm. And when you look at that, matching the two and extracting the most value, I think the mentorship is probably it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Deepto, maybe just lastly, what kind of is the path forward for the program over the next few years? I guess you don't know yet because it's just the first one. But what are your hopes for the next couple of years?
Yeah. So what we're hoping is that this is today we're starting out with the uh, inaugural cohort, and we're hoping that as we as they graduate, they will become ambassadors of our program and spread the word that hey, here is at least one among many companies who are meaningfully engaging in Africa to um, build that interface with the technology and the needs in Africa, right? So to me, yes, we will mentor another cohort of startups in the coming years. We will look to see if we can add elements of being able to share platforms so that people have hardware that they can work on. So we do aspire to graduate to that path. But more than that, uh, it's the narrative. And here, sitting here in the West, there's a there's a narrative about digital transformation that is centered around fintech, or more recently, let's say, Kenyans helping OpenAI with labeling and so that's relative to the narrative. But the narrative that we are yet to hear very profoundly is, hey, no, technology is getting embedded in healthcare, in agri-tech, in transportation, in education sectors, right? And I would like that narrative aspirationally to develop, and that way we can influence other American companies. We can influence our own government, saying that look, there is an aspect uh, of working with technology that is born here. That there's a lot of good business, good entrepreneurship, good interface with universities across Africa that we can do, right? And again, it's not so much about Qualcomm doing this. It's about, hey, if one American company can do it, so can others, right? And if we scale that, it will actually be fun, right?
Okay, amazing. Well, thanks so much to both of you for taking time today to chat to me about this. I hope we can change that narrative and build more stuff in Africa for sure.
Absolutely. I'm
Thank you.
confident. Thank
Thank you
you,
very much,
Paula. Good
Paula.
questions.
Thanks.
Yeah.